Hi everybody, on this video we are going to use a simple fluid animation to give light to this short scene. Let's begin. Sometimes, depending on the composition we have created, things don't look as dynamic as we expected, and a good way to enhance this animation is to make the environment react in some sort of way. Here we have a very abstract and stylistic scene, so it is quite easy to visualize this, but the idea is applicable to any setting. We can very well reproduce this with smoke, particles, and other objects. We will just explore this principle in a simple manner so you can figure out how to apply this later in your projects. So this animation has a very established rhythm. It starts slow, transitions fast into the second pose, and then moves slowly again. We could draw our frames directly on top of this drawing, but to make things easier and check the flow of the animation, let's create an animation folder on top of everything, and we'll just draw a simple line as a reference and help us establish this animation. Liquids really don't have an established shape, and they don't have to follow a strict change in geometry, but the flow of the general animation must follow a structure to make things more readable. So here I drew this single line being dragged by the character and pulled. The inertia makes it bend slowly until she changes poses, and it breaks, sending the line flying around her in an opposite angle. This change in geometry will create a sharp contrast between the shapes, and from this point the line will keep expanding around her at a slower rate. Again, this is to simulate the inertia of the bubbles and the resistance they will find in the liquid around her. That's one of the properties of particle systems. They have their inner velocity, the velocity they inherit from the environment, turbulence, and all of those things. But the gravity and inertia from the environment will also contribute and slow them down, and that's what we are trying to simulate here. Now that we have our main flow of animation decided, we can proceed to draw the keyframes. For this, we can create bigger masses being affected and shaped by the drag of the character. And as you can see in the fourth frame, the changes in geometry are way more noticeable. And also part of the bubbles are separating, and we can use this to our advantage to have pieces of them flying all over the place. In the next frame, we can hint that effect by adding a couple of loose bubbles around the main shape. However, it's important to remember that these particles are following the inertia of the original body, to a certain extent at least. They have velocity that they inherit from the body they came from, and even if they are going to slow down faster because they are not being carried or dragged by the rest of the bubbles, they shouldn't stop immediately mid-air. On this frame, I also decided to separate the main body of these bubbles, like it is being split in half by the drag just before the breaking point. Now in the next frame, during the breaking point, the geometry changed radically, and all of this mass is surrounding the character and slowly ascending, but it's also rotating. It is important to remember to keep the general shapes of the body of the bubbles not only expanding but pointing towards the direction in which they were rotating beforehand. You can also draw and define the shadow areas in advance to make shading more easy later. Now we proceed to draw the rest of the keyframes keeping these concepts in mind, being shapes consistent and slowly expanding and rotating away. Given this part of the animation is supposed to be slow. Now that we are done, we can see how the animation looks. And if you want to add extra detail to this, you can use keyframe shapes as well. Like here, I just drew a bubble, then enable the keyframes for this layer and change the position and the size of the layer, keeping it in sync with the keyframes. If you don't sync it, at least it has to alternate, but you should avoid just having higher frame rates for this than the one of your main animation. It can look a little bit strange. And after adding a few extra bubbles, this is the finalized animation. Now, to paint all of these frames, we can create an animation folder and use the bucket tool with a solid color to fill every corresponding frame, giving us a set of flat layers. Now we can create a layer on top of these folders, clip it, and change the colors. To create shadows, we can create another animation folder and paint them manually, using the areas of the shadows we drew before and adding new ones. We can also do that for the highlights as well. And after completing all of this, we can add a color layer to our animation folder, the one containing all of the line work for the animation. Using light color for line work works better for fluids. And we can repeat the same shading process for the extra bubbles we added on our keyframe shapes. And here it is, a simple animation that adds a little bit more of movement and life to the scene we had before. Of course, just how I say, this is a very abstract example, but it should make things a lot clearer in case you need to do something similar on a more grounded or cinematic scene. The important thing is to have the characters interact with their surroundings, and not having something like that feels like the character is completely isolated in a vacuum. But that's totally okay if that's exactly what you're looking for in your animation. And that's it. I hope that you found this useful. You can find my animations on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.